Hey friends, happy solar eclipse in Aries. My name is Latoya of Emerald Astrology. And yeah, today I want to talk with you about what the solar eclipse in Aries is all about so that you're able to surrender to the massive changes that are happening in the Aries sector of your life. So let's just go ahead and dive in. So yeah, that's my mission, is to do this and help you understand, like, the story continues. We're well into eclipse season, and actually the solar eclipse in Aries is pretty much wrapping it up for the first half of this year, because we have the eclipses later in the year. But yeah, with the solar eclipse in Aries is coming to a close. And this could look the development of the eclipses could last for like a week to 6 months. And I know that's a big range, right? But in general, the story continues. And so the major shifts that happens during the eclipse is now like setting into place, and then we're going to work with it moving forward. So my mission today is to help you understand these shifts. So in this talk, we're going to talk about the astrology around the solar eclipse. Then I'm going to close this talk with an oracle card so that we can focus in on the chakra that we can work with and just have our awareness on during the eclipse here. And then if you are a patron, you'll get an individualized reading. And if you're interested in that, definitely consider checking out my Patreon and becoming an Astro devotee, because that's where you'll get your monthly readings through that tier. So the solar eclipse happens on April 8th, as we already mentioned here. And 1:20 p.m. Central, and of course you have your time zones there. So make sure you consider your time zone. But the window of a total solar eclipse is between 12:20 p.m. till 3 p.m. So this is like when we see, the beginning when the sun is starting to be eclipsed by the moon, and then it completes itself around 3 p.m. It's a pretty big deal here in Central Texas that this eclipse is happening, because we're going to have the totality, or like meaning like the sun is going to be completely covered by the moon in the earth's perspective, and it's going to be casting a shadow on the earth, and it's going to make it appear as night or very dark. So we might see some stars outside. We might even get to see the devil's comet as well. So this is a pretty big deal, this eclipse. Yeah, and I was looking at the weather forecast, and it was saying that it might rain, actually thunderstorms. So that's gonna, hopefully not. That's gonna suck if it does, because this is a pretty big deal and we want to see it. And if it rains, it's gonna make it harder to see. So hopefully not. So the solar eclipse, again, it's when the moon perfectly aligns with the sun from the Earth's perspective, and it casts a shadow onto the Earth. So the sun is completely covered by the moon here, as we can see in this picture, and it makes it appear dark. So this could be very startling if you weren't, prepared for this, and yeah, it could just have like an unsettling kind of feeling, because but one moment it was daytime, and now suddenly it's very dark, and you're like, okay, where's the sun? The sun feels like it's swallowed up. And in the astrological sense, it signifies major endings and major beginnings. So like the sun being covered by the moon, it's like something is being removed from our lives, something's being taken away for a moment, something, things may not be as clear. That makes sense, because there's sudden changes, sudden shifts going on. And just like how like the sun is doing its eclipse, situation, this is like showing up in our lives in different areas. But if you want to look at your Aries placement, that's where you'll find where the major shifts are happening. It is possible that something will return later on after the eclipse series in Aries and Libra is done, but just know that these are just kind of really shifting your perspective and opportunities here. So we'll be dealing with that for a while. because the eclipses happens in Libra Aries until I think January 2025. So that's next year. So we'll see the eclipse in its totality. It will be going through central Texas, Arkansas, Missouri, Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, New York, Vermont, New Hampshire, Maine. So if you're in those places, you'll likely see the totality going on there. So that's really exciting if you're wanting to go observe this. Of course, be careful and make sure you have the right glasses. But yeah, so it's going to be amazing. To go back to the astrology of the eclipse, it's going to be in Aries. And so this energy is very daring, it's very self-starter, enterprising, can be very dominant, willing to just go out there and get things done. But it also could be very directionless and argumentative and impatient. So we want to be very mindful of how we use this Aries energy, especially with the eclipses, because we're definitely going to be feeling this. We're going to want to start things. We're going to want to maybe feel impatient about how things are moving along, especially with the other astrology going on around this eclipse. So just being mindful of these, just this energy in general is going to be really prominent during this time for you. And it could be leading up to the eclipse and also following, but especially on this day, April 8th. So we all have Aries in our chart, so we want to look at where Aries is placed. And yeah, just get familiar with that. I want to show you that the glyph of Aries looks like, camera showing. There we go. My mouse showing here. So it looks like this here. And you'll see Aries as symbol throughout this presentation. So that's the animal, the ram. Oh, here we are. That symbol. So the big picture view. So what is the astrology that's going on with the eclipse? So the sun conjuncts the moon, making the new moon, which is also talks about the solar eclipse because it's close to the north node or one of the nodes here. In this case, it's the north node in Aries. And so that signifies new beginnings. New moons always signify new beginnings. But with the North Node being included, creating the solar eclipse, these are major, massive changes, massive beginnings. So anything that's starting new around this time is going to be a really significant key player in your life story, especially in the Aries area of your life. The moon will also conjunct Chiron. And Chiron is the wounded healer, or the wounded one that wounds. So we have to make sure that we are mindful of how we use this archetype in our life, this energy in our life, or how we relate to this type of energy, because there's also new beginnings around this story. So if you find that you are more of like the one that likes to teach others about how to heal themselves, especially in the area that you have been wounded, that is a very chironic role that you're taking on, and that story might continue. Or if you identified as a wounded one and it don't necessarily understand how to heal yourself, then it might be the wounded one that wounds. And so we want to make sure that we're just kind of mindful that we don't continue the story, that we see like, oh, I am wounded here, and I can find how to heal myself here, or search for how to heal myself, find the medicine and empower myself. And so I think like really the most healing thing that we could do, uh, if we are the teachers that wants to help people heal themselves, or if we identify as the wounded one at the moment, just acknowledging that we are wounded, that we're not perfect, that our stories might be hurtful, and accepting this about ourselves. Acceptance is a very important key player in healing, because you can't heal if you don't know and you don't accept what happened to you, and that it was probably fucked up, especially in the lines of what is it, self. I'm losing words here because Mercury retrograde. But like self, where you're like putting yourself out there, being that Aries part of you, being that person that is willing to initiate and go out there and say, this is who I am. That part of you has been wounded, acknowledging that and finding ways to empower yourself to even show up, even though, you've been wounded here, is really important. So yeah, the North Node is involved here with this new moon, making that solar eclipse a thing. And I see this as like a portal is opening up to step towards destiny. So stepping in a new direction of growth, a new direction that is very challenging, that you're not familiar with, but still is a part of your soul story. So you should step into this and definitely take on that initiative, that ability to be courageous, be that Aries, that willingness to be that pioneer, that leader, going into places that you've never been before is appropriate for the solar eclipse in Aries. So the ruler of this moon is Mars. Mars rules Aries, and we look to it on the place that Mars is in. And so he's currently in Pisces. So Mars in Pisces can be a bit topsy-turvy because it's more driven by emotions, driven by vision, driven by its intuition. And so we have to be able to discern, is this my intuition speaking or is this my emotions, speaking? Which are both valid, but intuition leads to better places and emotions can leave us in a spiral and going through the same thing over and over again, especially if we've been, again, with a Chiron, wounded here. So paying attention to what your body is telling you and asking, yourself questions, these feelings, questions, is really important. Like, why did I have this butterfly in my stomach when I met this person? This person reminds me of, my ex or my past, my friend or what have you. And like, think about the relationship you had with them. And how is that, connected to this person that you're encountering? Let's say if it is a partnership that you're dealing with, potential partnership. So we want to like really analyze that, ask ourselves these questions, give ourselves that space, not necessarily rush into things, especially with Mars and Pisces. It's not very direct. It has to go through its cycles of feeling things through, seeing on all different perspectives, which Pisces is really good at. We're good at looking at the past, present, and future. And so Mars is doing this as well. And if we attune ourselves to this energy, this eclipse will be a much easier time for us. Another thing to be aware of is that Mars is getting closer to Saturn. So he's joining Saturn and will make us feel like our feet is on the gas as well as on the brakes. Because Saturn is very much about pause, stop, and even delays. And Mars is more about like moving forward and trying to push through things. And so having this foot on the gas and brakes can really make an issue here, right? And so we just got to be, with this configuration, I see that being more intentional with our actions, being more patient, even when the setbacks do show up, just knowing that it's ultimately for your protection. For the long-term plan, this is not something that if you are hit with delays or hit with setbacks, not to get caught up in the frustration of it, just reminding yourself like, okay, this might be protecting me from something that is not necessary for my life. And now it's time for me to be more intentional with how I use my energy. And yeah, especially if you have a day chart, because usually if you have a day chart, Mars is your malefic sect, and so that Mars energy is difficult to deal with. Like we might tend to want to rush through things or be more rash and not understand the intelligence of Mars to be constructive with it. So this is interesting because Saturn is our, if you have a day chart, Saturn is our constructive malefic of sex. So this energy together, we can utilize that Saturn, like, okay, yeah, being intentional, being purposeful with our actions and cautious would be, ideal. Um, use to our strengths. As for Mars, that tendency where we may not give it something to do and it overrides our actions. Bringing those energies together will be actually constructive. So I think, like, again, being very intentional about our actions, questioning what it is that we feel drawn to do, um, is going to be most helpful, especially um, because it perfects a couple of days after. So April 10th, this configuration Mars Saturn goes exact on April 10th. So leading up, after this eclipse happens, we'll have that energy really coming to the forefront. And so again, just being intentional with our actions is really important. And making sure that we're giving our intuition space to speak. And it doesn't speak loudly, it doesn't shout at us. It's more of a calming voice that tells us, like, hey, maybe we should do this instead. But we have to be able to quiet our emotions, because that could really override our inner voice. So while the eclipse is happening, we're in the middle of Mercury retrograde in Aries, and this is a time. So this is April 1st to April 25th. Mercury is retrograde. So this is a great time to reflect, review, reconstruct our sense of self, especially our sense of direction in life. Again, with that being Aries. So yeah, we want to be patient with ourselves. We had that Kazemi on April 11th, and which helps brings us clarity on the direction we're all going in this Aries area of our lives. So that's a few days after the eclipse happens. We had that Kazemi, and so again with that Mars and Saturn telling us to be more intentional, and then that Kazemi happens with us some clarity around what are we doing with this Aries area of our life. All these is very important to just pay attention to be aware of. So my voice is kind of being weird. So another thing that's happening around the eclipse is the horned comet, or the devil's comet. And this comet enters our solar system every 71 years. So this is a pretty big deal. My thoughts around this eclipse, around this comet coming through, listening to other astrologers that I like, listening to like the astrology podcast, they were talking about how this horned comet, again, like with the eclipses, it signifies like great leaders rising or falling, the birth of a great leader, the death of a great leader. But with the horned comet coming through, it's like an emphasis on this, like even a greater signification of a great leader rise and fall, and it depends on the color of the comet. So that's interesting. We'll see what this is all about, but it just kind of brings more emphasis on the specialness of this comet, of this eclipse in general. And yeah, so we'll see what that's gonna bring about. I guess I don't really have that much thoughts around it because I don't really think about comets that much, but that's what I've heard. Like it's just kind of like a greater emphasis on leadership, especially with it being in the sign of Aries. Um, see if there's anything else I wanted to say there. Yeah, I think that's about it. So in general, with the season of Aries, we want to ask ourselves, what are we passionate about? How can we jump in and champion what we are passionate about? And just being mindful of when we're feeling impatient and we're trying to push things when it's not obviously the time to move, or things are not flowing. So yeah, just being very mindful of how we channel this energy. And then with that Mars conjunct Saturn, that's going to really gives us that stop sign, or that go ahead, or that's like keep treading forward slowly but surely, because eventually you will get there. So being very constructive with our energy is really important. So I think just kind of sitting with back with a greater awareness of like where you fit into the bigger picture of your life, and where are things flowing, and just kind of wanting to add more to that. If that is your career, okay, like if things are moving in your career, then adding more energy into that, more of your intention to that is probably the thing to do. If it's home, then doing that with your family is really important during this time. um yeah, just being very just asking yourself, how can I be more constructive with this energy that is apparent and very apparent and available, is really I think a good thing to do during Aries season with these eclipses. So overall, the solar eclipse is good for accepting what is coming into an end and what is coming up, that is like developing in your life. So again, this is where the energy is going. How can I constructively move with this without trying to force my own plan? Because again, Mercury retrograde is about awareness of where you fit in the bigger picture. The solar eclipse is good for releasing that need to take action, like to assert your power, your will on things, and instead being more practicing non-attachment, and seeing where the energy is flowing and just allowing that to go in that direction, or things to fall away if you don't want that to continue in your life. And then we're setting an intention to honor where we are in life. Because again, we're not rushing into things, we're not trying to push an agenda. The divine is coming in and um, redirecting us with the eclipses here. So that's my thoughts on the solar eclipse in Aries. And now I'm going to pull a oracle card to see what chakra we can focus in on. So what energy center that we can focus in on is going to help us make the most of this solar eclipse. So, okay, so I got this card. It's called Soulmate. And it's the root chakra here. It's related to the root chakra. So what I'm seeing with this card is his third eye. This third eye is what jumps out and makes me think of Aries, of having a vision and willing to go and follow that vision, take action after that vision, right? And so we hold a vision with this solar eclipse in Aries. But again, with it being the eclipse, it signifies like the divine coming in and directing us. And so what I'm seeing here, it's kind of like, okay, we hold a vision, and it's up to us to see how like the universe is conspiring in our favor, even though, let's say, people are falling out of our lives, people are being removed from our lives, and new ones are showing up. Our soulmates, we have soulmates that come in at certain times, that leave our lives at certain times. But they may not last, during this lifetime. It might be just different periods, different seasons in our lives that they're coming in. But we hold this vision, right? And yeah, so just kind of coming back to ourselves, what are we rooted in? How are we rooted in? Who are the people, our soulmates that are feeding our roots, that helps us achieve our calling, achieve achieve our calling, what it is that we're going after. Who is our soul team? Who's our soulmates that are helping us do this, is what I'm seeing. And how are we staying rooted in ourselves, feeling doing things that helps us stay confident in who we are and our calling, so that we're not getting caught up in other people's mission. other people's stories and just giving us, yeah, just giving that space to think this through is really important, I think. Okay, so that's my thoughts on the solar eclipse in Aries, and I hope you have a fabulous one. And again, if you are interested in an individualized reading, definitely consider becoming a patron on Patreon and selecting the Astral Devotee tier, because from that's when you'll get your couple of readings every month. So I hope you have a great one, and I'll talk to you next time. Bye.